I felt very lukewarm about it.
Certainly, we have seen much worse.
Oh, yeah. This is not
podcast.
A yes, Giorgio.
Henry Winkler, Shelley Long, and Michael Keaton in Night Shift.
Welcome to Kyle and Dave versus the Machine. This week, we have an in-depth conversation about Ron Howard's second movie, although first studio film, Night Shift, starring the Fonz, and Batman, Michael Keaton, and Diane.
May I just say...
Shelley Long. I don't know.
She won some Emmys.
Clink. That's cheers. Dave, what were your thoughts on Night Shift?
It's kind of a weird movie. It's very 80s. Most of the jokes are pretty lowbrow.
We got teenage girls!
Premise is the hooker with a heart of gold, two unsuspecting naive guys who are going to turn their night shift at a morgue into a prostitution ring. Or like a high-end escort service, apparently.
High-end escort service, basically.
I felt very lukewarm about it.
Certainly, we have seen much worse.
Oh, yeah. This is not
podcast.
A yes, Giorgio.
There seemed to be this really fun setup. There was a good jokes, well-conceived situations at the beginning and end. The middle really seems stretched out because from the writer's perspective, these are two people that had been working in sitcoms for most of their career up until this point. This feels like a sitcom pilot forced to be 90 minutes. The situations in the middle are like, okay, like we kind of get it. We can move on to the next thing. And then finally when the resolution happens, like, oh, this is funny again. And all the characters do feel like sitcom characters.
Plastic,
the other thing too, like really, even though I do like Henry Winkler when he shows up in like supporting roles in movies, that's what we kind of discovered. So I don't know if he can hold a film because Michael Keaton comes in. This is his first film role.
Hi. I'm your new partner.
In a completely different like stratosphere. Like, of course, you're the one who broke out from this movie. And the other two basically went back to TV, and it's a different skill set.
Would I recommend people watch this? There are moments where you will, I laughed out loud.
Yeah,
there's some very good jokes. Henry Winkler, in some of the comedic moments where he's got to play it anxious or neurotic, he's pretty funny. It's not anything against his acting ability per se. It's just by the end, I was so annoyed by his character because he's such a fucking spineless piece of shit that I don't even care that he's supposed to win in the end. And there's some comedic actors that can pull that off really well, but whatever that line is, movie, TV, it's very hard to cross.
And there's people who have been able to go back and forth, but oftentimes there's those people who pop off in a couple of movies as like supporting characters where they show up for a couple scenes, like just nail it. And then Hollywood says like, oh, you should like now lead a movie. And you're like, no, they don't work this way. Like Sean William Scott, if I'm going to throw someone under the bus.
You didn't like the rundown? Ron Howard's intent is to keep things so light. So it is kind of hard to feel in balance. The opening sequence that feels like an 80s action film. We got this pimp who's murdered. And you're like, oh, this is quite an interesting tone. Feels like 48 Hours a little bit.
Yeah.
And then it just turns into like everybody's so sweet. And they're like,
48 Hours has, of course, the harder
together.
edge. I think that's the thing. Like you can watch interviews with Ron Howard where he talks about this. I was interested in making a soft R rather than a hard PG. I'm like, okay, well, phrasing. But I think that's something that was true for a lot of, well, actually, I think his entire career. I think he's more interested in like making movies that technically the whole family could watch-ish. Maybe not like little kids for this movie. He's not interested in people swearing, graphic nudity, that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the Ron Howard that you're going to get. You kind of know that going in.
80s nudity is bikini women who take off their shirt, jump up and down, and then are gone. And we'll see that later this year again.
Oh, here's the boob scene.
Whereas modern nudity is like one step away from pornographic.
This is such an 80s movie because there's not one, but two gay jokes in it. Nothing is worse than being labeled as a gay.
What's the worst thing that could happen to me in prison? But
that's, again, par for the course for an 80s movie.
Someone has to throw one in there. Burt Bacharach scored this.
Oh, that's right. We had such a conversation about Burt Bacharach in our episode.
This movie is the birth of That's What Friends Are For. Kyle hating on Tarzan. When you actually listen to it, that melody is interweaved through the whole film.
What's wild about it, for me, such an iconic song. You first hear the melody in the score throughout. I'm like, why are they playing that song? This doesn't even make sense in the context of the movie itself.
Well, the Fonz and Batman were friends. It just doesn't work.
This song was written for this movie, but then didn't become super popular for like another 2 or 3 years when Dionne Warwick would sing it for the AIDS benefit. Yeah. That's What Friends Are For, Dave, starting prostitution rings.
We're in the wrong business. We should have a prostitution podcast.
The ins and outs of prostitution.
They made a lot of coin.
Yeah, you hear that, YouTube?
What are we watching next week anyways?
The World According to Garp. I'm going to pretend I haven't watched it yet. Let's talk about boob scenes next week, Dave.
It sounds like a fish. Way to ruin the movie for me, Kyle. Garp likes boobs. Anything else we should talk about before we get out of here?
We're good. Let's go on our own night shift.
I'm not a grinder.
Oh, well.
Oh my God.
Rolling around in strange beds with strange men, and we are making money from that.
Is this a great country or what?